My best friend was the reason I lost her trust. Did you do everything we agreed on? The message that lit up on my husband's phone haunted me all night. It was from Jessica, my best friend, the person I trusted completely. Something about those words made me feel that beneath the surface of our perfect life, something dark was hiding. The day started as usual. Adam, my husband, was making coffee in the kitchen, humming to himself. His behavior was completely normal, but now everything seemed suspicious. He placed the mugs on the table, drying his hands with a towel, and I caught myself analyzing his every move. "How did you sleep?" he asked, sitting across from me. "Good. And you?" I replied, trying not to reveal my unease. Adam was the kind of man every woman wanted. Caring, smart, with a great sense of humor. But that's exactly what scared me now. Everything was too perfect to be true. Jessica came over after lunch. She brought a bottle of white wine and talked about her latest work adventures. Her laughter was light and genuine, but now I saw her differently. Every move seemed calculated, every word intentional. "You know, I've always admired your relationship," she said, sipping her wine. "Adam is just wonderful. How do you manage to keep him?" I laughed, trying to appear casual. "I don't know. Maybe it's magic," I joked, though something inside me was trembling. Jessica had been there from the start. She was with me when I met Adam. Her support had always felt genuine, but now every compliment sounded like a hidden competition. That evening, when Adam fell asleep, I took his phone. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to know. Jessica's messages were short but revealing. "Last night was incredible. Are you sure she didn't notice anything?" The blood froze in my veins. What were they hiding? This seemed like more than just friendship. I read those words over and over, trying to find another explanation, but none came. The next day, I decided to keep calm. I knew I couldn't act impulsively if I wanted to uncover the truth. Jessica invited me for a walk, and I agreed. "You know, I saw you and Adam last night when I was walking by your house," I said unexpectedly. "You looked busy." She stopped and looked at me, slightly flustered. "What? What are you talking about?" Her laugh was easy, but her eyes betrayed something else. "Just kidding," I replied, smiling. "I was just wondering if you're helping him with a surprise for me." "A surprise?" Jessica laughed, but I sensed tension. That night, I decided to take another step. Using Adam's phone while he was in the shower, I sent her a message pretending to be him. "Can we meet tomorrow to discuss everything?" Her reply came instantly. "Yes, at the usual place." Those words unleashed a storm of questions in my mind. What was the usual place? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, did I really want to know the answer? I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping Adam's phone in my hands. His shower had already lasted 15 minutes, giving me time. Everything I saw in their conversation felt like part of something bigger. But was I truly ready to uncover the truth? Could I handle the consequences if they turned out to be devastating? When Adam came out of the bathroom, I had already returned his phone to its place. I smiled and wished him good night, though my thoughts were far away. The usual place. Those words echoed in my mind like a siren. What did they mean? Tomorrow, I was going to find out. At night, I sat in the darkness. I was holding a small box I had found in Adam's drawer. Inside was a pair of earrings, and they were definitely not for me. I didn't wear anything like that. My heart raced. What did this mean? And most importantly, who were they for? The next morning, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. The earrings I found in Adam's drawer seemed like a silent accusation. Who are they for? The question pulsed in my mind. But instead of sinking into assumptions, I decided to act. I needed to face the truth, and Jessica would be my first step. I dialed her number, and to my surprise, she answered immediately. "Hey!" Her voice was as warm and cheerful as always. "What's going on?" "Hi," I began, trying to stay calm. "Do you have time today? I'd like to talk." "Of course," she replied. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," I lied. "I just want to see you." We agreed to meet at a small cafe that had always been our favorite spot. It used to be a place where we could talk for hours about anything. But this time, I was heading there with a heavy heart and thousands of questions. Jessica was already waiting for me when I arrived. She looked as flawless as ever. Her blonde hair gleamed in the sunlight, and her smile was so sincere that I felt a pang of guilt for my suspicions. But I couldn't back down. "How are you?" she asked as I sat down across from her. "Not bad," I replied carefully. "And you?" "Oh, you know, the usual. Work. Meetings. Sometimes it feels like there aren't enough hours in the day." She spoke easily and casually, but I noticed how her fingers nervously traced the edge of her coffee cup. It was a small thing, but it gave away her tension. "By the way, I wanted to ask," I feigned nonchalance. "Have you been talking to Adam a lot lately?" Her gaze briefly met mine, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before in her eyes. It was like a flicker of panic she quickly hid behind a smile. "From time to time," she replied. "He occasionally messages me for advice about surprises for you." "Surprises?" I asked, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "Yes," she nodded, "but I probably shouldn't talk about it." Her words seemed rehearsed, as though she'd been preparing for this question. I decided to press further. "Are you sure that's all? Because, it feels like there might be more between you two." This time, she lost control. Her face paled slightly, and she gave me a nervous smile. "What do you mean?" "Exactly what I said." I looked straight into her eyes. "I've seen a few messages, and they seemed quite interesting." She nervously glanced at her coffee cup, then back at me. "Listen, if you're talking about our meeting yesterday, it was just about a gift. Adam wanted to surprise you, and I was helping him choose jewelry." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Yes." Her voice was firm, but I could hear the tension. My heart pounded harder. If this was true, why did I feel like she was hiding something? After coffee, I returned home more confused than ever. I wanted to believe her, but something about her behavior made me doubt. Adam came home late that evening. His smile was as familiar as always, but now I looked at him differently. "How was your day?" he asked, sitting next to me. "Good," I replied, trying to hide my emotions. He hugged me, and I caught the familiar scent of his cologne. In that moment, I asked myself, if he's truly guilty, could he act this way? Yet Jessica's words still echoed in my mind. At night, when Adam fell asleep, I took his phone and checked his messages again. There was a new one. "Thanks for today." She didn't suspect a thing. My patience was at its limit. I needed to take the next step, but how? Was I ready to uncover the whole truth, no matter what it was? My heart pounded loudly in my chest as I walked out of the bathroom. Adam was sitting in the living room, staring at the TV screen. His face was calm, as if everything in our life was perfect. But I could no longer tolerate this farce. The message I had read the night before left no doubt. He and Jessica were playing me. I had to uncover the truth, here and now. I sat down next to him, and he didn't seem to notice my tension. "Adam," I began, trying to steady the tremor in my voice. "What's wrong, darling?" he asked, not even glancing away from the screen. "We need to talk." He finally turned to me, and his expression instantly changed. A flicker of worry crossed his eyes, though he quickly hid it behind a faint smile. "About what?" I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. "I know about you and Jessica," I said bluntly. His smile vanished as if wiped away by a magic wand. He looked at me with wide eyes, then shook his head. "What are you talking about?" "Don't pretend you don't understand." I raised my voice. "I've seen your messages. I know you've been meeting behind my back." Adam fell silent, weighing his words. I could see him struggling to find an explanation, but every second of his silence only confirmed my suspicions. "We were just discussing a surprise for you," he finally said. "A surprise?" I laughed bitterly. "You're calling the jewelry I found a surprise? Earrings that are clearly not for me?" Adam looked stunned. His reaction was as if I had pulled the ground out from under his feet. "I can explain." "Then explain," I shouted, standing up from the couch. His voice was quiet when he began to speak. "They're for Jessica, but you don't understand." "What don't I understand?" My hands were shaking. "That my husband is giving jewelry to my best friend? It's not what you think." He tried to move closer to me, but I stepped back. "Then tell me what it is." Adam went silent. His face looked guilty, but he said nothing. "You're cheating on me with her, aren't you?" My fury broke through my tears. "No," he exclaimed. "It's not like that." I could see how his web of lies was tangling around him. My suspicions, his silence, it all fit into one picture. "You know what, Adam? If you won't tell me the truth, I'll go to her myself, and she'll tell me everything." His face changed again. This time, he looked terrified. Don't. I laughed sarcastically. "That's all you have to say?" I grabbed my phone and started dialing Jessica's number. Adam tried to stop me, but I pushed him away. "Jessica," I began when she answered, "We need to talk?" "Of course." Her voice sounded nervous. "What's wrong?" "We'll meet at your place. Now." I didn't wait for a response and hung up. Adam looked like he wanted to say something, but I couldn't listen to him anymore. She stood at the door, nervously holding it with her hand. "What's going on?" she asked, though her voice already betrayed everything. "We're going to talk inside," I said, walking into her house. She closed the door and slowly turned to me. "I want to know everything," I said. And this time, no lies. Jessica looked at me as if she were battling herself. Her eyes glistened with unspoken words. "All right," she said, taking a deep breath. "But you might regret knowing." I stood in her living room, trying to steady myself. She sat on the couch, crossing her arms as if bracing for what was to come. "It all started a few months ago," she began. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Both of us flinched, looking at each other. "Are you expecting someone?" I asked. "No," she replied. I walked to the door and opened it. What I saw froze me in place. Standing there was Adam. His face was tense, and his eyes betrayed anxiety. He was holding a small box that I immediately recognized. My thoughts became a whirlwind. What is he doing here? And how does this fit into everything I just learned? "We need to talk," he said without waiting for an invitation. I glanced back at Jessica, who looked stunned. Her face had gone pale, and she was nervously wringing her hands. Everything about her indicated she hadn't expected to see Adam here and now. "Have you been following me?" I asked, barely restraining my anger. "No," he replied. "But I knew you'd come to her, and I can't let you find out the truth like this." "Then explain," I shouted. Adam stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He shot a brief glance at Jessica, who now looked like she wanted to disappear. "It's not what you think," he began, turning back to me. "Then tell me what it is," I said, crossing my arms. "Jessica and I were working together on a surprise for you," he said, lifting the box. "This is for you." He extended it toward me, and I slowly took it from his hands. My hands trembled as I opened the box. Inside was a pair of earrings. They were beautiful, but every part of me screamed that this was only half the story. "You're giving me these now because I started suspecting you," I said, looking him directly in the eyes. "No," he said, rejecting my words. "I've been planning this for a while, but what?" He fell silent, glancing quickly at Jessica. "Tell her, Adam," Jessica suddenly said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "She deserves to know." I shifted my gaze between them, feeling the tension thickening in the room. "What am I supposed to know?" I asked. "This isn't about me and Jessica," Adam said. "It's about you." "About me? What does that even mean?" "You need to know that recently, you've been different," he continued. "You've become suspicious, anxious, and it started to affect our relationship." "That's what you want to say?" I shouted. "That's your excuse?" "No," he exclaimed. "I love you, but I didn't know how to help you. That's why I asked Jessica to help me." "Help with what?" "We wanted to create something special for you, to show you how much you mean to us." I felt my rage beginning to fade, replaced by doubt. Could it be that I was truly overthinking? But something about this story still felt wrong. "And the messages?" I asked. "She didn't suspect a thing? What was that about?" "It was about the jewelry," Jessica interjected. "We wanted everything to stay a surprise." I looked at both of them, trying to gauge if they were telling the truth. But my heart refused to believe the story. It was too smooth, too perfect. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. All three of us flinched. I walked over and opened it. Standing there was an unfamiliar woman. She looked confused, but her eyes quickly found Adam. "We need to talk," she said. A chill ran down my spine. Who is she? And what does she want with my husband? Standing in the doorway was a woman I didn't recognize. Her long, dark hair fell over her shoulders, and her eyes burned with tension. She immediately locked eyes with Adam, and I felt the tension in the room skyrocket. Jessica froze in place, while Adam looked as if he had seen a ghost. "We need to talk," she repeated, her voice slightly louder this time. "Who are you?" I asked, feeling a whirlwind of emotions beginning to swirl in my chest. The woman turned her gaze to me, her demeanor softening slightly. "My name is Sophia," she said. "I think you deserve to know the truth about your husband." Adam tried to intervene. "Sophia, this isn't the time or place." "Shut up," she snapped, not looking at him. "She deserves to know." I invited her inside, though Adam and Jessica both looked as if they were ready to bolt. Sophia sat on the couch and took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Adam and we had a relationship," she said, meeting my eyes. The words hit like a punch. The world around me seemed to sway. "What?" I whispered. "It happened a few months ago. We met during one of his business trips. At first, it was just flirting, but things went too far." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Adam raised his hands in a defensive gesture. "It's not true. She's lying," he shouted. "I have proof," Sophia replied calmly. She opened her purse and pulled out her phone. "There are photos, messages." I stared at the phone, unable to believe my eyes. On the screen were pictures of Adam and Sophia, along with text exchanges that left no room for doubt. "How could you?" I whispered, feeling my heart shatter. "It was a mistake," Adam said, lowering his head. "I love you, but I made a stupid mistake." "A mistake?" I screamed. "You call this a mistake?" Jessica, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke. "I'm sorry, but there's something else you all need to know." I turned to her. Her face was pale, but her eyes shone with determination. "This isn't just about Sophia. I was with Adam too." This was the last thing I expected to hear. "What?" The words escaped my lips. "He came to me when your relationship started to fall apart," Jessica said. "He said he didn't know how to handle it. I tried to support him, and it went further than it should have. Both of you." I couldn't even finish the sentence. My body trembled, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Adam tried to approach me, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Don't you dare," I said, my voice barely holding together. I looked at the two people I trusted most in my life and couldn't believe they had betrayed me. Sophia just sat in silence, staring at the floor. You have no right to call this love," I finally said, addressing Adam. "Is this all I meant to you?" "No," he replied, but his words felt empty. I moved toward the door, trying to collect my thoughts. "I can't deal with this right now," I said. "I need to be alone." I left, leaving them in a room full of tension and discomfort. But as I walked away, I knew this wasn't the end. I walked down the street slowly, trying to calm my thoughts. But Sophia's and Jessica's words wouldn't leave me alone. Was this just the beginning? Could I uncover the full truth? Everything I thought I knew about my life felt like an illusion. Adam and Jessica had betrayed me. But what if that wasn't all? Sophia seemed to be the key to everything. Her confession sounded sincere, and the photos on her phone spoke louder than any words. I knew I needed to talk to her away from prying eyes to learn more. Later that evening, I messaged her, asking to meet. Sophia agreed, though I sensed a hint of hesitation in her response. We arranged to meet at a small cafe nearby. I arrived first and chose a table in the corner, where no one could overhear us. Sophia showed up 15 minutes later. Her face looked tired, and her eyes betrayed the tension she was feeling. She sat across from me, and we stayed silent for a few seconds until the waitress brought her coffee. "I know this might be hard," I began, trying to stay calm. "But if you've come here, tell me everything you know." Sophia sighed, staring into her cup. "Adam." She paused, searching for words. "He was something else to me. At first, it was just flirting, but then I found out more than I should have." "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning closer. "He's not who he seems," she said. "There's another side to him you probably don't know about." My heart tightened. "What do you mean?" He's had others. Not just me. My eyes widened in shock. Others? I don't know all the details, but I found a few names. They were in his phone, in messages. I didn't want to get involved, but when we were together, I noticed how carefully he hid his contacts. Sophia pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots. They contained names, addresses, and even some messages. I recognized a few names, including Jessica's. But there were other women I had never heard of before. Why did you decide to tell me all this? I asked, feeling anger well up inside me. Because I realized I was part of his game, she replied. I don't want to be part of it anymore. Her words felt like the last puzzle piece in a picture that was starting to come together in my mind. Adam was a manipulator. He used people's trust, creating an illusion of love and care for every woman. That's not all, Sophia added, looking at me with a serious expression. What else? He has an account, she said. I found documents when I was at his house. He's been setting aside money, but I don't know what for. My curiosity piqued. Do you know where he keeps these documents? In a safe in his office. The code is your wedding date. I felt my anger rise again. He had used our relationship even in his secrets. When Adam fell asleep, I grabbed his keys and headed to his office. The safe stood in the corner, just as Sophia had described. Entering the code, I opened it and found something that made me catch my breath. Inside were account documents, photos of other women, and even messages with Jessica that were far more explicit than anything I had seen before. These materials proved that his betrayal wasn't just a mistake, but a deliberate scheme he had maintained for years. As I closed the safe, I heard a sound. Someone was in the office. I froze, listening to the approaching footsteps. The echo of steps in the hallway paralyzed me. Clutching the documents I had just pulled from the safe, I held them tightly against my chest. My heart was pounding so loudly I feared it would give me away. The dim light in the office barely illuminated the space, but even in the faint glow, I knew. If this was Adam or someone he knew, I'd have little chance to explain myself. The office door creaked open quietly. Standing in the doorway was Mark. His silhouette froze for a moment in the half-light before stepping inside. His eyes met mine, and I saw more than just surprise. There was a mix of curiosity, understanding, and concern. What are you doing here? I whispered, trying to stay calm. That's what I should be asking you, he replied, lowering his voice to a whisper. Mark closed the door behind him and glanced at the safe I had just locked. His gaze lingered on me, and I realized he suspected what I had found. You knew? I asked, unable to hide my suspicion. About everything? No, but I knew some things, he said cautiously. Like what? That Adam's been living a double life, he replied. I've suspected it for a while. I stared at him, trying to decide if I could trust him. Mark had always been a friend to us, but now everyone seemed suspicious. Why are you here? I asked again. Adam asked me to pick something up from his office, he said, lowering his gaze. But now I see you're not here by chance. I found everything I need, I said. And now I understand he's been deceiving me far longer than I ever imagined. I showed him the documents I had pulled from the safe. Mark scanned through them quickly and sighed. This is bad. Really bad, he said. But there's something else you need to know. What? Mark hesitated, as if debating whether to continue. Adam doesn't just have relationships with other women. He also has debts. Big debts. Debts. I could barely believe my ears. Yes, I found out about them by accident. He got involved in some scheme that didn't go as planned. Now he needs money to pay it off. So that's why he created this account? I asked, looking at the documents in my hands. Yes, Mark replied. He was probably using these women to get what he needed. The explanation seemed too horrifying to be true. But deep down, I knew it was possible. We stood in silence as I tried to process what I had just learned. Then Mark added, You need to be careful. If you expose everything now, it could harm you. What do you mean? I asked. Adam won't forgive you if he finds out you know his secrets. He's hidden too much to let you destroy it all. I nodded, understanding that I had to tread carefully. What are you going to do? Mark asked. First, I'll think it all through, I replied. Then, I'll decide how to expose him. Mark looked at me with a mix of support and doubt. "If you need help, I'm here," he said. "I hope you won't regret that," I replied, trying to smile, but my emotions were too overwhelming. His face looked so peaceful it only filled me with more disgust. I hid the documents in my wardrobe and decided I would start taking action the next day. My plan was only beginning to take shape. The next morning, I received an unexpected message. The sender was a woman whose name I recognized from the list in Adam's documents. "I need to talk to you. It's important," she wrote. The morning felt strange. Adam was acting restless. His phone kept ringing, but he refused to answer, stepping out of the room to hide his conversations. His tension was obvious, though he tried to pretend everything was fine. I, maintaining a calm exterior, carefully observed his every move. When he finally left the house, I checked to see if he had left any clues behind. His laptop was locked, but among the papers he had carelessly left on the table, I found invoices and contracts with unknown companies. It looked like an attempt at money laundering or evading debts. Suddenly, I heard a knock at the door. Standing there was Mark. His face was etched with concern. "We need to talk," he said, stepping inside. "What's happened?" I asked, closing the door. "Adam suspects something," he replied. "Last night, he asked me if you had spoken to me." "What did you tell him?" "That you hadn't." But he looked very worried. "I think he knows you've found something." My heart sank. Adam could be dangerous when his plans were threatened. "There's more," Mark continued. "I found out that the people he owes money to are starting to pressure him, and it could affect you." "Me? How?" "They could use you as leverage. If you interfere, it could get dangerous." I felt fear creeping into my thoughts, but I couldn't allow myself to show weakness. Later that day, I received another message from the same woman who had asked to meet earlier. She wrote that she had important evidence that could change everything. We agreed to meet at a cafe in the evening. When I arrived, she was already waiting. Her name was Linda, and she looked tired but determined. "What do you know?" I asked as I sat across from her. "Adam used me, like he did many others," she said bluntly. "But that's not all. I have documents that prove he was involving his victims in illegal schemes." Linda pulled several folders out of her bag and showed me copies of contracts with Adam's name on them. I stared at the papers in disbelief. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I can't stay silent anymore," she replied. "He destroyed my life, and I know you're next." A chill ran down my spine. It turned out Adam wasn't just betraying me. He was using others for his dark purposes. "Do you know who else is involved?" I asked. "I think your friend Mark knows more than he's letting on." When I returned home, Adam was already there. His face looked tense, and his gaze followed my every move. "How was your day?" he asked. "Fine," I replied, trying not to show my emotions. But he clearly suspected something. "Were you in the city?" he asked, feigning casualness. "Yes, I met with some friends." "That's all?" I nodded, avoiding his piercing gaze. When he went to his room, I realized I couldn't delay any longer. My doubts about Mark were growing stronger. His sudden interest in my affairs and appearance at Adam's office seemed suspicious. If he was truly involved, I needed to find out how deep it went. That night, I retrieved the documents Linda had given me from their hiding place. As I was going through them, the bedroom door suddenly creaked open. His face looked angry, and his eyes burned with intensity. Adam stood in the bedroom doorway, his eyes narrowed and his voice cold yet filled with tension. "What do you have in your hands?" he asked, his voice icy. I clutched the documents to my chest, trying to appear confident. "You know exactly what this is," I replied, challenging him with my gaze. "You shouldn't have been digging into my affairs," he said, stepping into the room. His movements were slow, deliberate, each step weighted with unease. "And you shouldn't have been destroying our life." I shot back, taking a step backward. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door. Both of us froze. Adam shot me a furious look before striding toward the entrance. I seized the moment to hide the documents under the mattress. A minute later, I heard Mark's voice. "We need to talk, Adam," he said. "Now's not the time," Adam replied, irritated. I cautiously stepped out of the bedroom and saw Mark standing in the hallway, holding some papers in his hands. His face looked as though he had uncovered something significant. I think now's the perfect time, Mark said, raising the documents. You've gone too far. What are you talking about? Adam tried to maintain his composure, but there was a hint of panic in his voice. About this, Mark said, throwing the papers onto the table. I know about your debts and how you've been using people to get out of trouble. And what are you going to do about it? Adam stepped closer to him, his voice turning threatening. I think you should explain everything, I interjected, stepping out of the shadows. Adam turned to face me, his eyes blazing with anger. You both don't understand anything, he said, raising his voice. Then explain it to us, Mark replied. Adam sighed and sat down on the couch, rubbing his face with his hands. Fine, he said at last. You want the truth? Here it is. His words fell like hammer blows. Yes, I'm in debt. Massive debt. I made some bad decisions in business, and it cost me everything. I thought I could fix it, but things just kept getting worse. And so you decided to use women? I asked, trying to hold back tears. It wasn't as simple as it seems, he replied. I was cornered. Jessica agreed to help me. She knew I was desperate and chose to support me. Support you? I shouted. She was part of your schemes? She just wanted to help, he said. But then everything spiraled out of control. And Sophia? And Linda? I added. Adam lowered his head. They were part of it, but I never intended for things to go this far. His words sounded like excuses, but they only fueled my anger. Mark stood up, his face filled with disdain. That doesn't justify you, he said. You ruin people's lives to save your own. And you're no saint, Mark. Adam suddenly shot back, his voice rising. You've known about this for a long time, and you were willing to stay silent. What? I looked at Mark, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. Mark sighed and lowered his head. I knew Adam was in debt, he admitted, but I didn't know about everything else. You're no better than he is, I said, glaring at both men. At that moment, the door suddenly swung open. Standing in the doorway was Jessica. Her face was tense, and in her hand, she held what looked like a flash drive. You all need to see this, she said, stepping into the room. Her face was cold, and her gaze was filled with determination. Everyone in the room froze, waiting to see what would happen next. Everything you need to know is on this flash drive, she said. What exactly is on it? Mark asked, slightly tense. It's recordings and documents proving that Adam didn't just manipulate women. He also used his friends, she replied. I glanced at Adam, whose face had turned red with anger. You've gone mad, Jessica, he exclaimed. What are you doing? Saving myself, she said coldly. And maybe someone else who deserves it more than you. I grabbed the flash drive and plugged it into the laptop. Video recordings, financial documents, conversations, all of it unfolded before me like a puzzle finally coming together. It turned out that Adam wasn't just deceiving women. He was also involving his acquaintances in illegal schemes he used to cover his debts. Mark's name appeared in several transactions, though he had tried to hide it. How could you hide this? I asked, looking at Jessica. I hoped I could get out of this without hurting you, she said. But then I realized it was impossible. You wanted to save yourself, not me, I replied, feeling my anger rising. Maybe, she shrugged. But now you have everything you need to end this. Adam snapped. He lunged toward the table, trying to grab the flash drive, but Mark stopped him. Enough, Adam. Mark shouted. It's over. No, it's not over. Adam yelled. You don't understand what you're doing. We understand perfectly, Mark replied, holding him back. I called the police, and within minutes, officers were at the house. Adam screamed, trying to justify himself, but all the evidence was against him. Mark remained silent, acknowledging his involvement in the schemes. Jessica stayed seated on the couch, staring at the floor. A few weeks later, after Adam's arrest, I began piecing my life back together. The evidence on the flash drive was enough to launch a criminal case against him. Mark agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Jessica disappeared from my life, leaving behind emptiness and pain. I stood by the window, watching the sunset. Everything I thought I knew about my life had crumbled. Yet, I felt relief. The truth had come to light, and now I could start anew. What do you think could have driven Adam to take such risky actions?